Welcome, everyone, to the Success Elevated podcast. As always, I am your host, Hayden Lee, and I am joined this week by my co-host, Katie Harris, managing partner here at Spot On Solutions. Katie, thanks again for coming on to help me interview an awesome guest this week.
You bet. One of my favorite people, and now I can proudly say like co-author. That's a new friend title that I have going on with
I like
Eric.
that.
Yeah.
Feels good.
Anytime we have Eric or Katie on a pocket, I can introduce you both as co-authors of this great book. So anyways, Katie, as Katie mentioned, we're talking again with our good friend of the podcast. He's been on multiple times. We've talked about some really awesome subjects with him. And we figured this subject would be another great one to talk to him about, but it is Eric Sprague from Super Tech U. Eric, thanks again for coming on the show.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Thank you, Hayden.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say we shanghaied you a little bit on this episode,
Yes.
Eric. So,
well, I think you leaned over to me at dinner at a conference and went like, "Hey, is there any way you could podcast next week?"
well, here's the thing.
And I'm not going to say no to that, right?
I know. It was very cool. And sometimes you know people for a very long time, and then you learn something new, and perception, like respect, just increases. And so recently, everybody knows this is episode 5 of our mental health awareness series that we're doing, year 2 of doing this. And so this is the concluding week that we have for Mental Health Awareness Month. We've talked about how these podcasts have been surprisingly impactful, not just for our own team here at Spot On Solutions, but most listened to podcasts that we have. The feedback that we get is a lot, and I think it speaks to the topic. And so when Eric and I were recently both speaking at an event, he stood on stage and he shared some things, some personal stories that I just didn't know about you. And I thought, man, this just goes right into what we're talking about. So I'm texting Hayden saying, hey, change of plans for week 5. And I'm leaning over to Eric at dinner saying, hey, I'm going to need you to come on the podcast and tell this story. Because if you've been following these 5 weeks, as we've talked about mental health awareness, we've talked about a lot of different parts to it. And your story that you've lived, I think, is so real. And so I appreciate you coming on and talking to us a little bit.
I'm happy to do so. It's
a
topic that I don't normally talk about, right? Like, so it's a topic that I don't like go and be like, hey, I have mental health issues like everybody else, right? But I've had my fair share. Katie, what you're referring to on stage was I was kind of telling a story about my journey into entrepreneurship. And I kind of started the story as a kid where, like, I'm a very competitive person by nature. And when you're super competitive, it sounds like a weird analogy, but it's kind of like a thoroughbred horse, right? Like, you're willing to go, but you're kind of a pain in the rear end too, right? You're high strung and you're twitchy and, and I think a lot of people who on a disc are like a high D. There's some element of that, right? They're highly tuned,
highly driven.
Yeah. So, I had always been the kid that was willing to put in more hours, more work, more whatever, whether it be school, sports, anything. I was like, I have to win, right? And I was winning at life, like all the way up until I was like 38, right? Like everything I touched just was like turned out great.
Like trophies all the way around.
Everywhere, right? And I just, and it sounds so arrogant and bad, but I got to this point where I was just like, man, anything I decide to do, I'm just going to like kill this, right? Like it's going to be easy. And then I had what Michael Gerber calls an entrepreneurial seizure and decided to go out on my own with my college roommate, Larry. And we started a cleaning restoration business. Well, it started as just a cleaning business. And we started in 2008, so
great year to start a business.
Immediate. Yeah. No experience in the industry, never been an entrepreneur. Like I had a corporate job where I was super successful and I was mistaken. I thought like if you're really good at like a high level job, that means you would be a good entrepreneur. And that is not true because I was a specialist and very good at a few things. and all of a sudden asked to be a generalist. And I'm like, there's so many things I'm no good at, right? I've just discovered that I suck at many things, right? And look, that took a little hit on the ego, right? And you couple that with the Great Recession, and we were just losing daily. Phones not ringing, bank accounts just dwindling, right? And we're trying everything that we can figure out or try to figure out as new entrepreneurs how to stay alive. And look, obviously we did, or I wouldn't be sitting here today. But it came. We did a lot of crap. Like we were, cleaning, doing janitorial work at hair salons every single night of the year, overnight, and then out, trying to drum up work or clean carpet, or we were doing REO trash outs because everybody was going bankrupt. I mean, we were doing like the worst work in the world. And I'm like, how did I get here? Like, 2 years ago, I was flying around the world first class, staying at 5-star hotels for my job. And now all of a sudden I'm like cleaning up poop underneath a house, like, for like almost nothing.
And discovering you suck all at the same time.
Yeah. And as everybody who's an entrepreneur listening knows, you got to learn a whole new skill set, right? And I didn't know that at the time. And I started learning it, but during the period of losing, it had shaken me to my core. And really, by the time we started like kind of figuring out how to be entrepreneurs, I mean, that part was fine, but I felt like I was a shell of my former self because I was not prepared for 2-3 years straight of losing. That really messed me up in my head. So I think that's the story you were talking about.
Yeah, that's the story I'm talking about. Because I think it's a lot of people's stories. But
sure it is.
But that's not the type of stuff we talk about, right? And I think when you step into, when any entrepreneur, I think just people in general, you step into your careers, but entrepreneurs, and you're like, I got this. And the harder I work, the better I'll be. And the more I work, the better I'll be. So I think you said it really well. It sounds just like when you say, I discovered I sucked. Like, what? I'm serious. Like, that's a hard thing when you're used to being the guy, when you're used to being the one, I can figure this out. Is it something that was a personal realization, or is it something like, did you have people in your life that were like, hey, listen, like something's not right here? We've talked a lot this month with people about recognizing some signs when things start to be different, when it's not just a bad day, it's a bad day after day after day after day, right? So what was the process like for you, and how did you go from this is bad, how did I get here, to I got a plan?
Well, number one, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk about it. You got to remember too, my age, we didn't talk about this kind of stuff. Like I grew up in a household where, unless Darren Hardy says, his dad used to say, unless you're showing bone, you're not injured. My family was kind of that way. My parents were very quiet and to themselves. And I felt kind of ashamed for feeling that way, so I kept it to myself and just, I guess, suffered in silence, probably like lots of people do. And it started slowly. Like I started recognizing that, like, hey, I think I'm depressed. I don't know what depression is because I've never been depressed before. And I didn't really view my depression. Like I realized some people are clinically depressed like their whole lives. Like it was not that, right? It was, I'm depressed because I'm losing all the time. And it's affected my self-image. I think that's the issue, right? So, and then Larry, my business partner, who was also, a lifelong friend, was starting to mention like, dude, you don't seem right. Like he couldn't put his finger on it either, but he was just like, I don't know if you need to go see a therapist or this or that. And I think when I really recognized, Katie, that I needed to do something was just like, even doing the things that I was the most, like I loved in life, I found no joy in them. Like I would go skiing on a weekend skiing's been my thing since I was a little kid. And I'd just be like, yeah, all right, whatever. Right. So like, and I remember being on a chairlift going, I'm doing the thing. I live in this beautiful area. I'm doing something that I'm pretty good at and I really enjoy. Why am I not happy? Like, why am I not high-fiving like all my friends are? That's, I think, when I really recognize like there is something like fundamentally wrong here. And I will say this though, I'm not a person who needs to have a lot of fun. It sounds so bad. Well, no,
You just need to win. You just need to win.
Ed Milet has a great saying. He says, winning is more fun than fun is fun. And I can resonate with that. So like, I think it took me a long time to recognize that, because I recognize that if I'm not winning, then I'm probably not having, like the fun is the win. And I'm not winning. So it only makes sense that I'm not having a good time. But then it went way deeper than that. Like I couldn't enjoy my family time. I couldn't enjoy my hobbies. I couldn't enjoy anything. I was just stressed all the time. And feeling like my self-esteem had gone way down. I mean, like, look, when I started that business, my ego was like sky high. And then all of a sudden it's in the toilet, And I started fixing it. I didn't tell anybody. I guess I was ashamed or embarrassed or whatever. So I was like, well, I can start fixing this myself through exercise, through trying to eat better, trying to learn how to sleep. Cause I was always the guy like, oh, I'll just sleep when I'm dead, like 3-4 hours a night, I'm good. And, I didn't realize if I slept 7 or 8 hours, like how much different my mood would be. And yeah, I guess it was kind of a journey of self-discovery. Like podcasts were starting to become popular then too, like 2011, 12. So I started listening to a few of those, and I'm gravitating towards like mental health ones and take care of yourself ones. And to be honest, those were super helpful in my journey to, I guess, heal myself. And when I say heal myself, I, I don't think I've ever been healed, because the entrepreneurial journey is one that you're always going to have problems and you're always going to take it's just up and down, right? So I started riding bikes, and over time, all of a sudden, a little bit of joy started coming back in my life. And, I started, kind of like taking on bigger challenges. So like, I guess I had to find some things where I knew I could win, right? Like I had to I had to curate my own wins, and they started outside of work.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I have to rebuild myself. I have to rebuild my sense of self-esteem. So I started riding bikes, and then like immediately said, I'm going to do this 100-mile ride with 10,000 feet of climbing. And here I am, like I haven't exercised in years and I'm totally out of shape. And I remember and I announced it to the world. Like I put it on social media. I went to the Chamber of Commerce, which ran the race, and said, I'm going to do this, right? Like there's no turning back. But I remember just by doing that, my self-esteem just went up a little. It's like, oh, that felt kind of good. Like people were like, holy crap, that's great, And then I trained for 9 months. Like I was a complete maniac. I'd be out at like midnight with lights on riding, or up at 5 a.m. or whatever, because I was like a man on a mission. And I
You
think
think it's because you could control that piece of
I
your
was just going to
life?
say, because I have total control. It's the only thing in my life I had total control over. I can go ride my bike. And, the riding the bike led to eating better. And then it led to like, hey, you should sleep more if you can. And we're in restoration, so we're not always sleeping as much as we'd like, right? But and I also recognize that I can't let perfect get in the way of good enough. Like there are going to be days that I can't ride my bike, or days that I do eat a bad meal and go to McDonald's and hammer down a bunch of crap. And which had become a problem leading up to that. So I think just trying to, yeah, Katie, you hit the nail on the head. Just finding one thing in my life that I could exercise some control over certainly didn't cure me, but it definitely helped me.
Yeah.
I love that example, Eric, for a lot of reasons. And again, I think that's what's so great about this mental health awareness series that we've done. And I love kind of closing out this series over the last 5 weeks with this conversation, because I think you've applied a lot of the principles that we've talked about with like Ashton at the beginning of the month, and with Marcy and every, like, it's been really, really fun to kind of sit down and go through these conversations. But what I think is so cool is that you talk about how you had to find a way to win, or you had to find the things that you could control. And in a lot of cases, that was outside of work. And I think you were really caught up in all of the work things. And I think a lot of people do the same thing. They're so caught up in the work and the grind and the trying to accomplish all of these things and hit all your revenue goals or whatever it might be, that you've got to find some ways to win, or you've got to find some ways to recharge, or whatever it might be outside of work. And I think I love that you did that you recognize that, hey, there's going to be crappy days at work, but I can't let that control who I am. I'm going to go get on my bike after work, and I'm going to feel a lot better about everything. Right. Or I'm going to, go skiing, I'm going to find a way to win during that day. And even though it might not always be at work.
Yeah. And I think, Hayden, I think if I give myself, I tend to be hard on myself about everything. Like, no matter what I do, it's never good enough. Like, people are like, "Oh, you did this." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. It sucked, who cares?" And, but I had to find something that I could literally look at objectively and go, I'm getting better. Like the bike doesn't lie. If I go climb this mountain, I either do it in 50 minutes or I do it in 45. If I do it in 45, I'm making progress. That was one of the reasons I like to bike, because I like numbers. I like data. So I have a heart rate monitor so I can track that. I have a power meter. I have my speed. I have all these statistics where I can literally sit and go, I'm making progress. Like,
I'm doing better. Yeah.
I'm doing better, right? And just that tiny little win, like I did that same hill 1 minute faster, would be like, that was like rebuilding my self-esteem, like one ride at a time a little bit. And, the other thing is that I had to put in so many, like Katie hit the nail on the head earlier. It's like, we always just want to work more or do more, right? Like as entrepreneurs, you're just like, well, if I'm getting this result with 10 hours, what would 12 hours a day be? And if I got that at 12, then let's do 14, and it's actually the law of diminishing returns, right? The longer I stay at my desk, I'm probably not being very productive. And I was being super guilty of this because I felt guilty because we were losing to ever leave the office.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would be like, I can't have any fun. I can't go do anything for myself. I have to fix this. Well, that's a lot of weight. And then, I can't talk to my team about it because they're going to feel insecure. Like, my boss has mental health issues and wants to talk to me about it. Like, am I going to have a job? Is he going to go away? And I can't talk to my spouse or my kids because they want to feel safe, like I'm providing. I can't talk to my friends because they don't own businesses and they don't understand. I can't talk to my business partner really either because he's got his own stuff he's trying to deal with through this whole debacle, right? So it's freaking on me. That's how it felt anyway. I probably could have done things better, but I dealt with it the way I understood, right?
Well, it's interesting to hear it from your perspective, because after we've talked to Patty Beard and Marcy Richardson and Ashton Holbrook, right? All I would really consider experts in this space. And a lot of things they're saying are true in your experience. And I think they're true across the board for people, but we feel so isolated and so like, I'm the only one that feels like this. But it's interesting to hear you say it. Like, number one, like, we've asked all of them, like, what do you do if you start to see this in somebody you work with, And the great advice is just ask them, just talk to them. Hey man, are you okay? And I love that you have a friend and a business partner that did that for you. That was like, hey, you don't seem quite yourself. Are you okay? Which at least opens the door to ask yourself that question. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, and when Larry was like, hey, I think need to go see a therapist or something, right? You know, I mean, he was saying that in all the nicest ways. And
Yeah.
you know, I was just like, no way. Like, I am not seeing a therapist, right? Like, and maybe that was the wrong move for my, maybe I should have, right? Like in retrospect now, like kind of seems like good advice. I wasn't ready to do that, right? So I was like being very much me. I was like, I'm gonna go fix this myself. Like if I want to get the result, it's incumbent upon me to figure it out. Not everybody's wired that way, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But you know, for me, I think the best part of the writing, I mean, yeah, I got the little wins, but all of a sudden it focused everything else in my life. It's like, well, I can't work 14-hour days if I'm going to go ride 50 miles tonight. I need to make sure I get done in 8 what I need to get done. And, you know, there were a lot of upsides to, I know I'm just like harping on the writing, like it's the only thing, but it was my only thing.
But everybody has their thing,
Yeah.
right?
Right. So all of a sudden it's like, well, I can't work 80 hours a week and do this bike training. So I need to learn how to manage and delegate and do all these other things that I've been a bottleneck for a long time. I need to let go. I need to let go to grow. And like just stuff like that, like the bike thing for me did a lot of that. And I also think just getting rid of a lot of my tension, like just a lot of negative energy by that, you know, you go ride a bike for 3 or 4 hours, you're too tired to be tense. It's not happening. You're calm by that point. You've let it out. Now I might wake up the next morning freaking, but at that moment, I can go to sleep because
Mhm.
I wasn't sleeping through this whole period because I was just so distraught that we weren't winning and I was afraid we weren't going to make it. I couldn't go to bed. Like my mind would just be like, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? How do I fix this? I could never sleep,
Yeah.
which is bad for you.
Well, now I can see, honestly, I've known you for a long time and I know how passionate you are about coaching entrepreneurs. And I know a lot of times one of the first things you talk about is like people have to take care of themselves. People have to take care of themselves. And I've always seen you be so passionate about that. And this puts a big why behind that for me. So now if we fast forward, right? We fast forward, you figured a lot of things out and did a lot of things right and got the wins, sold the restoration company, started another company. And now you're stepping into this, you've been in this coaching space for a long time now. Tell me a little bit about how that affects how you coach and what you see in the entrepreneurs you are coaching.
We're all a disaster, Katie. No,
Secrets out, secrets out.
I think, well, it's interesting because I mainly coach, you know, kind of smaller and a lot of times family businesses, right? So my whole
So
coaching,
like $1 to $3 million
yeah, right.
businesses
Yes.
trying to hit their first million or million to 3.
Yeah, yeah. I would say under 3 million, you know, usually around 3 million, I will move them on to somebody else, right? They have new needs. So my coaching practice is very much about the person. Like we can build skills later, but until we build you, we can't get any progress. Like, you know, I have a few clients like this where they didn't know it, but I really spent the first almost year of our coaching just fixing, I'm used doing air quotes, them, right? Because they're so burned out. They've felt all the same things that I've, and, and they just don't know where to turn, right? That's why they don't call me because they're killing it. They call me because they're frustrated and they want to quit.
Yeah.
So I already know if they're coming to me, you know, Jeff Jones at Violand said to me one day, he goes, Eric, you're the Dr. Phil of the restoration industry.
Say thank
And
you very much.
I was like, yeah, I might be. But, you know, I feel really passionate because I've been in their shoes and I know the stresses and I know the fears. I try to spend a lot of time at the beginning building them up because until the foundation of them, the foundation of their business is them. Until that is solid, there's not much we can build up from. So we have to fix us first. We are the product. I said that the other day in the talk I gave. like, for most businesses under 3 million, the owner is the product.
Mhm.
I mean, as they scale past that, now it's systems and managers and all that stuff. But at the beginning, and look, the beginning can be 2 years for one person and 20 for the other person too, right? Like it
Yeah.
just kind of depends. And like I have one client in particular when they came to me, had just been like not failing, just struggling for a couple decades
Mm.
and just frustrated and like super hardworking, smart people who you could tell were kind of like they were down, they're just down and just tired of the grind. And we started working and same thing, working on them. Like, hey, how many, you need to have somebody on call so you can have a day off, right? Like that's not unreasonable. And then as they started to get rested, because I almost think they were just so burned out,
Tired, just tired.
as they, we kind of put the cart in front of the horse and hired a couple people to free them, even though that financially was not like probably the wisest move. But we understood, I think all of us, that if they didn't get some rest, we can't move forward.
Mhm.
And they added $1 million in revenue in our first year, and they've added no 2.5 million over 3 years to their what they were doing before.
Wow.
But look, it all started with fixing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
In a lot. Oh,
I
go
never
ahead.
told them that we were working on them.
Right.
All your coaching clients are going to listen to this podcast and they're going to be like, is he talking about me? Like, not me.
Well, you know what, Katie? I'm pretty much talking to all of us.
Yeah.
The Success Elevated podcast is brought to you by SOS Navigator. SOS Navigator is an on-demand training platform geared towards marketing, personal development, and business growth. We understand that as a business owner in the service industry, you wear a million hats. Let SOS Navigator be a simple and cost-effective way for you to continue to grow your business. Click the link in the show notes below and use code SOS Podcast to get 10% off your next on-demand training course.
Well, I think one of the things that you talked about there. Well, the big central piece of it, obviously, is like you are the product, and at times, like you are also the problem, right? Like as if you're thinking of yourself as the small business owner or the entrepreneur, like you've got to start looking inward as to, okay, what can I be doing to better help myself? And then if I can take care of myself a little bit better, then I can help my employees and my team and my company grow and everything. And it's all connected to like who you are, right? And it just feels like we're in a day and age that it's weird. It's something that I feel like I've noticed, and I notice it in myself. It's not just something I see in other people, because that would be the antithesis of what I'm talking about. But I feel like we're in a world that it's all me, me, me. But a lot of people blame maybe their problems or their failures, I guess, on others. It's a weird like dichotomy, Eric, and I think that the core central piece of what you're getting at with all of this is you had to look at yourself to be like, what can I do to fix this? And that's how you've kind of applied it almost to your coaching. And I love that perspective, because it's something that I feel like is lost in the world today. It's like, hey, I'm not going to blame my problems or my business's problems on other people. Like I'm going to go try and fix it because I got to go fix myself. I don't know. It just feels like it's something that's lost in the world a little bit.
I didn't have it then, but I tell you what, I wouldn't want to be like a new entrepreneur in the last 5 years. And I'll tell you why. Because I feel social media has done more to hurt young entrepreneurs' mental health than anything in the world, because they get on there and they see all these people who are like, work 20 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years. And, it's get up at 3 a.m. and blah, blah, right? And that's the only path to success. And look at me in the private jet that I just walked over to and took a picture next to, because I don't even own it. Whatever, right? Like I'm kind of like, I feel like that's also BS, right? Like that's not how I know I'm fortunate. I have a lot of very successful friends. I don't know anybody that lives like that.
Yeah.
Like seriously, right? So, but everybody's looking at these images going, I don't measure up to this. I can't compete with this. And, you know, the reality is that to be a good entrepreneur, I think I put this in the book somewhere. I think you have to do things that are like both consistency and sustainability are what's key, right? The people I know that are very successful, far more successful than me, if you look at their life, they're just doing the same things, the right things over and over and over. And they're not way working 20 hours a day. And they're just not. So I think there's more mental health issues in the entrepreneurial space now than ever because we're flooded with false narratives.
Yeah.
I remember I read a book a while ago. It's Greg McKeown, and the book is Essentialism. And it was like about just the most important things. And it was a hard book for me to read. Matter of fact, I started it a few times and I was like, the book is stupid. And the only reason I was saying this book is stupid is because it was everything I kind of needed to hear. But at one point in the book, he talks about somebody just totally burnt out, right? To the point of kind of having a breakdown, honestly. And he talks about the number one thing we can do as entrepreneurs, and I would say just as people for mental health awareness, honestly, is protect the asset. You have to protect the asset, and the asset is you. Like you are the asset of your business. You are the asset of your family. You are the asset of your life. And so we have to protect that asset. And a lot of times that means more sleep. That means eating better. That means finding the things that make us feel like we win. That means having the friend that says, hey, are you okay? There's a lot of things that go into it. But we get so tied up in the perception, like you were speaking to, the expectation largely placed on ourselves that it's easy to get to that place where you're just alone and stop taking care of yourself.
It's interesting, Katie. Like we're all so self-absorbed, right? You know, and I was talking to a friend of mine who's super successful. He actually started a business in his dorm room in college and took it public. When he left, it had 10,000 employees and $1 billion a year in revenue.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, we're talking somebody who
said you don't know anybody that lives like that, Eric Sprague.
Oh, I know one person that lives like that. Anyway,
well, I knew you did.
No, he doesn't. He takes such good care of himself, right? And he works like 6 hours a day, but it's super focused, right? Like I've learned a lot of what I've learned from him. He's an amazing man. But I remember I was all wrapped up in, you know, I was talking about like, I have to do this because it's going to be my legacy. And he just stopped me and he goes, there's no legacy, dude. And I'm like, well, what? You know? And he goes, no, there's not. He goes, I built that business. When I left, if I had gone back 3 months later, not one person would know who I am. He's like, it just moves on. He's like, so you have to make sure you build a life that you can live. Like doesn't mean you're not successful. It doesn't mean you're not trying hard, but you have to understand it's not all work, you know? And look, he admittedly went through all the same crap we're all talking about right now when he was young, and he just got on the other side of it and was like, that is no way to live.
Yeah.
You know,
I still want to give you a shirt now that says build a life you want to live. Like that's a cool thought.
Well, it's really interesting. I heard Ken Goodrich, who is the king of HVAC, and he owns Gettle. He's owned a lot of companies, and he had said, and he had been very overweight, and you know, like he I think again, he's one of those people that just goes all in on building, right? And I believe he has the largest private equity buyout in the history of home services. Right. So somebody's very successful, but he was on a podcast because he's gone on this health journey and lost like a lot of weight and the whole thing. And he said, if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't do it because it was too hard. It took too big of a price. The price wasn't worth it. You know, essentially the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Now I know that's easy to say once you have a lot of money, right? Everybody says, but I mean, you know, as he reflected, he was probably just like, yeah, I wouldn't do that again. I think a lot of us would say that. To be
Yeah.
honest.
Well, so what do you say? What is your advice, I guess, for any entrepreneurs, anybody listening to this podcast right now? And they're like, man, I get what those dark days feel like. I know what you're talking about. What do you say? What is the first step?
I mean, I think the first step is probably admitting to yourself that you're not right. Right. You know, like you're not all good. You know, whether you should go talk to somebody else about it or not, I don't know. Like, I can't give you an answer on that. But, and then I would say you got to find, like, because look, you know, I think it's different for everybody. Some people talking about it with somebody probably would be more helpful to them than anything else. For me, that would make it worse. I need action. I need to go do something. I need to find something to burn off my, you know, my energy or my fears or whatever, right? I think you have to kind of know yourself enough to know, as you guys both know me, I think like a tool like DISC to understand how you're wired also was super beneficial for me, because all of a sudden, you know, look, my D score is 99, right? So I'm not going to be the person who's happy if we're losing. And I think just knowing that about myself, because I had some self-awareness, be like, okay, this is something that I have to worry about. Like, because, you know, when the first time I ever saw Dr. Robert Rome do the DISC presentation, I remember this, like he looked at our audience and he goes, you D's, you die first. Because you're always stressed out and you're never satisfied. And I was just like, that resonates. Right. And I don't want to be that person. I'd like to live a long life and happy and healthy and all those things. And look, that's still a work in progress. I mean, I have this new business. You're catching me on a day that I don't feel good. And I didn't have a good day yesterday. I was down. Like a couple things had happened and I was feeling like I was losing. And I went home and sat at the fireplace in the backyard and looked at the mountains and went, okay, like, you know, you got to take a breath and tomorrow's a new day and you can still win. Whereas before, I don't even think I could have done that. I would have just been like wigging. So I think, Katie, the long answer to that thing is, I think you have to know yourself well enough to know what might work for you. And that might not be easy to do.
Yeah. And then I guess additionally, it's I don't know if brave's the right word, being brave enough to step into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look, I certainly wasn't. I was not brave. I hid it from everybody. The first time I'd ever mentioned anything about my mental health was on stage 2 weeks ago or a week ago. I've never said this to anyone.
Really?
Never.
Wow.
No.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, but
I mean, if somebody asked me about my mental health, I wouldn't hide it, but it's
Right.
nothing that I would ever, well, yeah, I've really struggled a few times here and there.
Yeah, well, but I think even more so, Eric, I think even to Katie's point that like you have to be brave, but you can be brave without, you don't have to get on a stage and talk about it, right? Like you can be brave just,
Probably
hey, I'm going to, right. Like you can just accept, like, I think a brave piece that a lot of people avoid, going back to what I mentioned earlier, people aren't even brave enough to admit they have a problem or that something is wrong. Like be brave enough to say, hey, I am noticed something my friends have mentioned, that my business partners mentioned something to me. I am going to be brave enough to like go correct this or go look for help or go ask for help. Like that's a brave piece too. Like be self-aware enough and brave enough to say, hey, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to solve this problem, or I'm going to look for help to try and solve this too. Like that's brave in and of itself.
People I've talked to in this space, because it's prevalent, right? And it's 1 in 5 people that have some sort of challenge with mental health, whatever that looks like, burnout, anxiety, whatever. It comes in so many different forms, and I think that the ability to just take another step, right? Like I love that you say you sat outside and you're like, okay, today sucked.
It sucked. It was okay.
Today was hard. Today was hard, and that's okay. Gonna do it again tomorrow. So.
Yeah, you know, I also think in the restoration space, I bet you it's more than 1 in 5, because it's a very tough industry. There's a lot of drama, no matter what position. Like you could be a project manager, your entire life is drama.
Well, Ashton Holbrook, who's a clinician who was on with us on episode 1 and 2 this month, he said 70% of people experience trauma, right? And trauma is the leading cause to anxiety and depression. Well, I would 100% agree with you that in the restoration space, more than 70% of people experience trauma. We basically live in trauma.
Oh, yeah. So as I started going on my journey, I started kind of coaching my own staff members like, hey, you okay? Like those were never things on my mind before. It was just like, get out there and make me money. Right. And all of a sudden, like, I'm like, do you need a day off? Like, do you need because I'm looking at you and I'm kind of feeling like I'm looking in the mirror and I think your wheels might fall off the wagon soon. So like, do you need a couple days off? Do you need to go do something else for, or whatever. I think too, especially look, I think, because people always say, oh, millennials and Gen Z or whatever, they're so sensitive and blah, 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 blah. They don't have any of the different problems than we do. They just are more comfortable talking about it, probably.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Look, I got all kinds of friends. I'm 57 years old. We're all messed up too, but we just generally, I think it's an awareness thing that I don't think anything's changed. That's my take. I just think that they grew up in a time where it is more okay to talk about it.
Love it.
Our entire team were millennials. And before we sold. And once, we kind of had to learn their ways too with mental health, because they would come and be like, I need tomorrow off.
I need a mental health day.
Yeah. And at first Larry and I were like, mental health day? Like, what the hell is that? And, but we started to learn it's like, hey, this is a tough industry and it can wear on people, especially when you're a frontline technician and you're interfacing with like stressed out clients every day. That adds up, man. And it's tough. So, yeah, kudos to the people who, I think the companies long-term who will keep technicians the longest are the ones who care for their needs outside of work as much as inside.
Wow. What a great little nugget there. That's awesome. Yeah. Cause I think you've got to pay attention to this stuff as a business owner and maybe you're not experiencing it yourself, but there's for sure somebody on your team that is experiencing it and, you got to take care of them. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Eric, I know you've mentioned a lot of really awesome things. Katie kind of had you, teed you up with a great recommendation of like, what are some things that business owners can do? I think you shared some awesome insights and I appreciate you getting a little vulnerable on the podcast. It was a great conversation. Anything else that you would recommend or that you would kind of point, or anything else that you would love to just, if you could talk to every business owner right now, which, our audience isn't quite that big yet, but we're getting there. If you could talk to every business owner in the restoration or cleaning space and tell them one thing about mental health or taking care of yourself or personal development, I know that's something obviously you've mentioned multiple times. What would you kind of sum it up all into one thing?
I believe this coming from a sports background that being an entrepreneur is akin to being an extreme sports athlete in the sense that entrepreneurs don't lead normal lives. They literally have nothing in common with the general population. I really believe that. I mean, the stress of making payroll every Friday, competition, we could sit here for an hour, Hayden. I could list all the fears that we could have as an entrepreneur, right?
Yep.
So if you are an extreme sports athlete, business athlete, you have to take care of yourself like an athlete does. Like if you look at an athlete's life, which I've been one in the past, you almost live like a monk. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're training, you're recovering, so you can just take training out and put work in the middle of it. But are you getting up and, maybe exercising? Are you meditating? What's your diet look like? Are you drinking enough water? Are you tracking your sleep data with like an Aura ring? Like if you're gonna be this business athlete, then act like one, right? It helps. And look, you're starting to see a lot of athletes, like Olympic athletes, like Simone Biles, like the pressure, Michaela Schifrin, a skier too, greatest skier of all time. She folded under the pressure at the last Winter Olympics, just folded, literally. Now, she had other stressors going on in her life. Her dad had passed away in a tragic accident. Everybody expects her to win, 10 gold medals or whatever. And she's a human being. She's all added up and she just choked. Right. And that can happen to any of us. That can happen at work. So we have to take care of ourselves accordingly.
Yeah.
That would be my suggestion. So like I have a whole routine. I do the same thing every day. I try not to deviate very much. That's why going on the road wrecks me because I can't do my thing. So if I had any suggestion, it would be like to look at your life, knowing that it's not a normal life, and then what habits will you put in place to deal with it? That would be my suggestion.
Be an extreme business athlete right there.
Ah, that's so good.
That's our next book.
There you go.
That's the next book.
Well, and honestly, we didn't even get to the book, which I know you talk about in this. So the Road to Seven Figures, brand new book you have coming out. We'll have you back on the podcast and we'll talk just about what the Road to Seven Figures look like and why you decided to write that book. Why in the world you let me come in and help write part of it with you, which was an awesome honor.
Because you're smarter than I am. That's why.
That's awesome.
Why else would I ask?
But
Go ahead, Katie.
This is a big part in the book, right? It does set a foundation. Yeah.
I said this the other day when on stage, like in the home services space, you're not going to make past seven figures alone. Mm-hmm. Like I don't know anybody who's a one-man show or one-woman show who's at $1 million or more in revenue doing some sort of service work. Mm-hmm. So you're going to need a team. Well, you can't build a team if you're not good. You have to be good for them. And if you're not good for them, they're not going to stay. So to me, it's common sense. Like if I want to build a business of any size, I'm not saying every business needs to be $1 million either, but it helps. And you've got to get good with you first.
Yeah. So good. Eric, seriously, thank you so much for coming on today. The insights were awesome. I seriously appreciate the conversation. And I think it's like me and Katie have talked about a bunch. I think it was the perfect way to close out this year's mental health awareness series. I'm going to change a little bit because I think you've given some great answers. And I love that you kind of summed up our entire conversation with that, message there at the end. But I still want to ask you, because I know you've got a lot going on and you've got a lot of great insights and you're always reading. It seems like every time we talk to you, you've read some cool new book. So I'd love to still ask the three kind of final questions that we ask all of our guests. First and foremost, you got a book or podcast that you're reading or listening to that you just really love right now?
I'm going to give you a book that I've read several times that is probably my favorite book. It's called Quiet by Susan Cain. She has one of the highest TED Talk this video, I think millions of views on YouTube, but the book, I'm an introvert by nature. I can extrovert when I need to, like a verb, but I'm an introvert. I like to be alone. I like to be quiet. Like the person you see at a conference is not really who I am. I have to expend a massive amount of energy to be that person, and it's not sustainable for very long for me. And, the business community especially rewards extroverts, right? People who are willing to get out there. So I think for anybody who is an introvert, the book Quiet is a huge help in understanding why you are who you are and what you can bring to the table. But almost more importantly, because like I had Larry read it too, Larry views introverts like they're a deformity or it's like a disease, right? Because he's an extreme extrovert and he just cannot get around. And I think lots of extroverts feel this way. They don't understand why that person says, I want to go be alone or I need to go recharge or whatever. So Hayden, I think that's probably one of the best books I've ever read.
That's awesome. Great recommendation. I love the introvert extrovert conversation's awesome. And I think it leads perfectly into second question, which is how do you relax at the end of a long day? You've mentioned some awesome things like skiing and biking and having
No, that's not
some
the
alone
relax.
time. How do you relax? What do you do?
Katie knows what I do. I watch television.
We are admittedly TV junkies at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I don't ever, like, I'm not a person who on a Saturday afternoon would ever sit and watch TV or anything like that. But at the end of every day, Hayden, the only way that I can completely unwind is to watch a couple hours of TV.
Love it. Love it.
And,
Gotta have the white space as people have mentioned on the podcast.
yeah, well, television, you don't think.
Nope.
You just kind of,
watch.
actively take it in.
Yeah,
and they just
awesome.
canceled like my favorite new show. I'm super angry about that.
What was your new show?
NCIS Hawaii. I love that show.
Dang it.
Yeah.
Dang it. Gotta find a new one.
I'm looking. Katie gave me some suggestions. I don't know. I can't find the perfect. See,
I told him to go watch Night Agent on Netflix, so we'll see.
So, Hayden, I'm gonna refine that slightly.
Yeah,
I
go
need
ahead.
to watch something that it's not too dark or heavy because I can't take that at the end of the day.
Right.
But it can't be completely stupid and mindless either, right? So like I watched all like 21 seasons of NCIS like every single night, like one, because like there'd always be like murder, but they didn't really show it, and then you're kind of trying to figure it out.
Yep.
I kind of like shows like that.
Yeah, NCIS, Law and Order. I'm the same way.
Those are any of those.
Yeah. Final question, which again I think relates to a lot of our conversation today. But if you could rewind and tell younger Eric one thing, whether it's the start of your professional career or the start of owning your own business, what would that one thing be?
I think what I've learned, Hayden, and look, I'm going to tell young Eric, and I'm telling the person who's sitting here right now that I need to learn how to be happier because I'm not good at it. It doesn't come naturally because I'm always on to the next thing, right? So like you're never like you get that win and you're, where most people would be like, I'm going to celebrate that for a couple of days. And I'm so excited. I'd be like, yeah, great. Next. Right. Yeah. So I'm not good at being happy, and that affects other people in my life. And I'm still working on that. Right. So the same exact thing I would tell my 8-year-old self, I still have to tell my 57-year-old self. Like I obviously haven't figured it out yet.
It's just a good reminder. Hey, it's a good reminder, right?
Yeah, like I don't mean I'm never happy. Katie's around me a fair amount. Like it's not like I'm never happy, but like just some people are just pretty satisfied or happy a lot.
Right.
I ain't that guy.
Yet. You're not that guy yet.
Yeah. Hey, what's the tree analogy? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, which you would have loved to tell your younger self.
Right.
Hey, be better at being happy 20 years ago, but the next best time is now. So you can still do it. So
well, I'm pretty happy right now with you guys.
Oh, good. Well, we're happy as well that you came on the podcast. This is some of our favorite conversations. We've loved having you on in the past. We hope to continue to have you on in the future, Eric. Thank you so much again. We'll make sure to link both the book and Super Tech University in the show notes. Really appreciate you coming on in the conversation we had. And yeah, we'll have you on again in the future.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.
This has been Success Elevated, making you a little bit better one show at a time. Thanks for joining us. Please subscribe on YouTube or any other major podcast platform to listen to more episodes. We are proudly brought to you by Spot On Solutions. If you'd like to learn more about how we can help you grow your business, please check us out at spotonsolutions.com.